Hello, survivors. Thank you for taking the time to listen to the story. If you haven't already done so, please subscribe to our channel. We appreciate it, and thank you in advance. Please leave the name of the city you're listening from in the comment section below. It helps us see our reach in the community. Let's start the story. My name is Jordan Ruiz. I'm 24, and 3 days ago I was a brand new security guard at what used to be one of Pennsylvania's most popular amusement parks. Now it's probably a crater, if the military did what I think they did. I need to tell someone what happened. Maybe writing it down will help me sleep without seeing Bobo's painted smile dripping with gore. The attack started at 2:43 p.m. on a Saturday. I know the exact time because I was checking my watch, counting hours until my shift ended. Third day on the job, and Dale, my supervisor, had stationed me near the kiddie zone and the artificial lake. "Easy patrol," he'd said. "Just keep the teenagers from making out behind the funhouse." Liberty Wheels was packed. October weather brought families out in droves, kids clutching balloon animals, parents hauling oversized stuffed prizes, the constant background symphony of carousel music and mechanical whirring. The Spin Devil roller coaster dominated the skyline, its red tracks twisted against blue sky like a steel pretzel. I was watching a group of teenagers near the duck pond when the screaming started. Not the good kind of screaming, not the delighted shrieks from the gravitron or the nervous laughter from the haunted house. This was raw terror, the sound humans make when something fundamental breaks. A man in the Spin Devil queue was convulsing on the concrete. Mid-30s, polo shirt, cargo shorts, typical weekend dad. His family surrounded him, his wife shouting for help while their daughter, maybe 8 years old, knelt beside him crying. I sprinted toward them, fumbling for my radio. "Dale, medical emergency at Spin Devil. Request paramedic." The man's convulsions stopped. For 3 seconds, the world held its breath. Then he lunged upward with inhuman speed and sank his teeth into his daughter's forearm. The child's scream cut through every other sound in the park. Blood sprayed across the queue barriers as the father, no, the thing that had been a father, tore a chunk of flesh from his own child's arm. His eyes had gone completely white, pupils rolled back, but somehow he moved with horrible precision. "What the hell?" I reached for my baton, but 3 more people in the queue collapsed simultaneously. A teenage boy, an elderly woman clutching a purse, a vendor selling overpriced sodas. They all went down like dominoes. Then they got back up. The teenage boy rose first, his neck twisted at an impossible angle from hitting the concrete. Bone protruded through his skin, but he didn't seem to notice. White eyes, slack jaw, moving with jerky determination toward the nearest person. A little girl holding cotton candy. I keyed my radio again. Dale, we need..." Static. Nothing but static. The elderly woman lurched toward a family with a stroller. The baby inside was crying, and something about that sound drew her attention like a magnet. She moved faster than any grandmother should, reaching for the infant with gnarled fingers. I couldn't process what I was seeing. My training kicked in. Crowd control, de-escalation. But nothing in the manual covered this. The father who'd been convulsing was still attached to his daughter's arm, and she'd gone limp. Too much blood. Way too much blood. "Everyone back away," I shouted, drawing my baton. "Medical emergency, give them space." Nobody listened. Half the crowd was running, stampeding toward other areas of the park. The other half stood frozen, phones out, recording. The infected, that's what I call them now, though I didn't have words then, ignored the fleeing people and focused on anyone who stayed still. The vendor shambled toward me, his white uniform stained red. I'd bought a Coke from him an hour earlier. Friendly guy, talked about his grandson's Little League games. Now his throat had been torn open, probably during his fall, and blackish fluid leaked down his chest. "Sir, you need medical attention," I said, holding up my hands. "Please stay back while I call." He lunged. No warning, no hesitation. One moment shuffling, the next attacking with primal fury. I swung my baton instinctively, catching him across the temple. The impact would have dropped a normal person. He barely staggered. I hit him again, harder, across the jaw. His head snapped sideways with a wet crack. But he kept coming, Fingers reached for my face and I could see dried blood under his nails. The smell hit me. Rot and copper and something else. Something chemical. Third swing caught him between the eyes. He went down, but so did my composure. I'd just clubbed an injured man unconscious. Except injured men don't get up from head trauma and keep walking. The park had descended into chaos. Screams came from every direction. The carousel, the game booths, the food court. Over the PA system, some automated announcement about safety procedures played cheerfully while people ran for their lives. I saw a clown, Bobo, the birthday buddy, one of the park's main characters, stumbling out of the funhouse. Half his makeup had smeared off, revealing gray skin underneath. His red nose hung by a thread, and one of his oversized shoes was missing. But it was his smile that made my stomach turn. The painted grin remained, but blood coated his teeth, dripping onto his polka dot costume. 3 kids, maybe 10 years old, approached him excitedly. "Bobo! Bobo! No!" I sprinted toward them, but I was too far away. "Get away from him!" Bobo's head snapped toward the children with mechanical precision. His painted face split wider as he opened his mouth, revealing teeth that were definitely not part of the costume. The kids froze as he advanced. His usual bouncy walk replaced by a predatory shuffle. I tackled him from behind just as he reached for the smallest child. We went down hard on the pavement, his bulky costume cushioning the impact. He twisted beneath me with surprising strength, clawed fingers grasping for my throat. "Run!" I yelled at the kids. "Get your parents and run!" They didn't need to be told twice. Bobo bucked like a wild animal, his painted face inches from mine. Up close, I could see bite marks on his neck, deep gouges that had turned black around the edges. His wide eyes stared through me, seeing something I couldn't understand. I pressed my baton across his throat, trying to pin him down. "What happened to you? What is this?" He answered with a wet growl, jaw snapping toward my face. Saliva mixed with old grease paint dripped onto my uniform. I put my full weight behind the baton, cutting off his air supply, but he didn't seem to need oxygen. His struggles never weakened. A gunshot cracked across the park, then another. Security or police, maybe, though I couldn't see where. More screams followed, but different now, sharper, more desperate. I looked up from my struggle with Bobo and saw why. Liberty Bear, the park's beloved mascot, was tearing apart a family near the gift shop. The costume head had partially split, revealing something gray and twisted underneath. One furry arm had been shredded, exposing bone and sinew, but the creature inside kept moving. A mother tried to shield her toddler while her husband swung a souvenir baseball bat at the thing that used to bring joy to children. The bat connected solidly with Liberty Bear's head. The costume head flew off entirely, revealing the horrific truth. Whatever was inside had once been human, but decay had set in rapidly. Flesh hung in strips from its skull, and one eye socket was completely empty. Yet it kept advancing, arms outstretched toward the screaming toddler. Everywhere I looked, the same nightmare played out. Park employees, visitors, vendors, all infected with whatever this was, all hunting the living with singular focus. The carousel continued playing its tinkling melody while infected riders stumbled off, still clutching their painted horses' reins. Bobo went limp beneath me. For a moment I thought I'd choked him unconscious, but then I saw the massive head wound. Someone had hit him with something heavy, a tire iron maybe. Blood and white matter leaked onto the pavement. "You okay?" I looked up to find a young woman with short brown hair and oil-stained coveralls. She held a wrench the size of my forearm, dripping with gore. Her name tag read Mia and had a cartoon Ferris wheel logo. "You're security, right?" She helped me to my feet. "What the hell is happening?" "I don't know." I wiped Bobo's blood off my hands, trying not to look at what remained of his face. "Some kind of outbreak. Disease, maybe. Chemical leak." "Disease doesn't do that." Mia pointed toward the gift shop where Liberty Bear was now feeding on the father who'd tried to protect his family. "I work the Ferris wheel. Been here 2 years. Never seen anything like this." A fresh wave of screams came from the midway. Through the crowd of fleeing people, I could see more infected emerging from various attractions. A princess character from the fairy tale castle, her blue dress torn and bloodied. 2 game booth operators, moving in tandem toward a group of trapped teenagers. "We need to get out of here," I said, checking my radio again, still static. "Find the exit, get to the parking lot." "Won't work," Mia shook her head. I was coming down from the wheel when this started, looked over the whole park. Every exit's packed with people and those things are following the crowds. It's a stampede out there. More gunshots echoed from the main entrance. Through gaps in the crowd I could see muzzle flashes and people going down. Whether from bullets or bites, I couldn't tell. "Then where?" I asked. Mia looked toward the center of the park, where the Ferris wheel stood motionless against the sky. "High ground. I know how to run the wheel manually. We get up there, we can see everything, figure out what's happening." It made sense. The Ferris wheel was isolated, accessible only by one narrow pathway. Easy to defend, hard for infected to climb. But getting there meant crossing 200 yards of open midway, where chaos reigned. "We need supplies," I said, eyeing the nearby game booths. "Weapons, food, anything useful." "There's a maintenance shed behind the duck pond," Mia said. "Tools, first aid kit, bottled water. I was heading there when I saw you wrestling with Bobo." A child's scream made us both turn. Near the duck pond, a family was cornered by 3 infected park employees. The parents held their kids behind them while the infected closed in slowly, savoring the fear. "We have to help them," I said. "We have to survive," Mia countered. "Look around. This isn't a rescue mission anymore." She was right, but watching those kids cry while their parents prepared to die, I couldn't just walk away. "The shed first," I decided. "Get equipped. Then we help whoever we can on the way to the wheel." Mia nodded grimly. "Stay close. And if I tell you to run, don't argue." We moved carefully along the edge of the midway, using game booths and food stands for cover. The infected seemed drawn to movement and sound, but they moved slowly enough to avoid if you were smart about it. The maintenance shed sat behind a cluster of fake trees near the duck pond. Mia produced a key ring from her coveralls. Apparently she had access to employee areas. Inside, we found a treasure trove. Toolbox filled with hammers, screwdrivers, utility knives, a case of bottled water, emergency first aid supplies, and most importantly, a baseball bat autographed by some minor league player, probably a prize that never got claimed. "Better than a baton," I said, testing the bat's weight. "You ever kill anyone before?" Mia asked. Pocketing a box cutter. "No, you. Not until today." She hefted her wrench. That clown was my first. Felt wrong, even knowing what he'd become. We loaded our pockets with supplies and prepared to leave. Through the shed's small window, I could see the family by the duck pond. The infected had them completely surrounded now. One of the children, a boy, maybe 6 years old, had broken away from his parents and was running blindly toward the water. An infected security guard, not anyone I recognized, intercepted him easily. The boy's scream cut off abruptly as teeth found his throat. "Jesus," I whispered. Mia grabbed my arm. "We can't save everyone, but we can save ourselves." The Ferris wheel beckoned in the distance, its colorful cars swaying gently in the afternoon breeze. Between us and safety lay a gauntlet of horror, infected park characters, terrified visitors, and the growing realization that Liberty Wheels had become a feeding ground. As we prepared to leave the shed, the PA system crackled to life. Instead of cheerful announcements about ride safety, a panicked voice filled the air. "All employees to emergency stations. This is not a drill. We have a code black situation. Multiple medical emergencies throughout the park. If you are injured, do not..." The transmission cut off mid-sentence, replaced by that same mechanical voice promoting the upcoming Halloween spectacular. Mia and I exchanged glances. Code black. In amusement park terminology, that meant fatalities. "Ready?" she asked. I gripped the baseball bat tighter and nodded. The Ferris wheel waited, our only chance of surviving long enough to understand what had turned our workplace into hell. Outside the shed, Liberty Wheels continued its transformation from dream into nightmare, one scream at a time. The The journey from the maintenance shed to the Ferris wheel should have taken 3 minutes. It took us 47 minutes of pure hell. Mia led the way, her knowledge of employee pathways proving invaluable. We stuck to service roads behind attractions, avoiding the main midway where most of the chaos concentrated. But even the back routes offered no sanctuary. Behind the tilt-a-whirl, we found the ride operator slumped over his control panel. At first glance, he looked like he'd simply fallen asleep during his break, until we saw the bite marks covering his arms. His uniform was shredded, name tag reading Kevin hanging by a thread. "We should check if he's—" I started. Kevin's head snapped up. His eyes had gone milky white, and black fluid leaked from his mouth onto the control switches. He lunged across the narrow booth, fingers grasping for Mia's throat with primitive hunger. She swung her wrench in a clean arc, catching him in the temple. The impact sent him sprawling back into the control panel, accidentally triggering the ride. The tilt-a-whirl lurched to life, its cheerful carnival music blaring across the park, while Kevin's body rolled between the spinning cups. "Great," Mia muttered, trying to find the kill switch as the music drew attention. "Might as well send up a flare." Infected began emerging from various attractions, drawn by the sudden noise like moths to flame. A cotton candy vendor shambled around the corner, pink spun sugar still clinging to her hair despite the gaping wound in her neck. Behind her came 2 game booth workers, their colorful vests splattered with gore, moving with that characteristic stumbling gait. "This way!" Mia finally killed the power, plunging the ride into silence. But the damage was done. At least a dozen infected were converging on our position, drawn by their basic attraction to sound. We sprinted toward the kiddie area, where smaller rides created a maze of potential cover. The miniature train track offered a narrow pathway between attractions, elevated just enough to give us an advantage over the shambling infected below. "Up here," I said, helping Mia climb onto the track. "We can follow this toward the wheel." The kiddie train sat motionless on its rails, a colorful engine with 3 cars decorated like circus animals. As we balanced on the narrow track, walking carefully between the rails, I noticed movement inside the train cars. A child, maybe 4 years old, sat strapped into the elephant car. She looked peaceful, almost asleep until she turned toward us. Half her face had been torn away, revealing bone and muscle underneath. Her small hands clawed at the safety restraint with mindless persistence. No understanding of buckles or release mechanisms, just raw instinct to reach us. "Jesus," I whispered. The innocent horror of it, a child reduced to pure predatory instinct while trapped in a ride meant to bring joy, hit me harder than any of the adult casualties. Mia stopped beside me, her face pale. "I know her. Emma Rodriguez. Her mom brings her here every weekend." She paused. "Brought her here." The infected child struggled with her safety belt, small fingers scratching uselessly at the buckle with no comprehension of how it worked. Around us, more infected were climbing onto the track with clumsy determination, moving with that single-minded focus that characterized all of them. "We have to keep moving," I said softly. Mia nodded, wiping her eyes. "Yeah, we do." We continued along the track, stepping over the gaps between ties while infected gathered below us. Some tried to climb up but lacked the motor skills, simply reaching upward with grasping hands. Others stood beneath us, arms raised, following our movement with vacant stares and snapping jaws. The track curved around the merry-go-round, where painted horses rose and fell in endless gallops, while the infected paid no attention to the motion. 3 park visitors sat motionless on horses, but as we passed, their heads turned to track us with mechanical precision. One, a teenage girl, had managed to stay upright despite a massive bite wound in her shoulder. She reached for us as we passed, her fingers brushing my ankle, mouth opening and closing soundlessly. "They don't understand pain," Mia observed grimly. "Don't feel fear, just hunger." A section of track ahead had been damaged, probably by panicked crowds rushing through. The rails bent upward at an odd angle, creating a gap we'd have to jump. Beyond it, the Ferris wheel stood like a lighthouse in the chaos, its colorful cars still and silent against the darkening sky. Can you make that? I asked, measuring the distance. Have to. Mia backed up a few steps, then ran forward and leaped. She landed hard on the far side, rolling to absorb the impact. Your turn. I took a running start and jumped. My foot caught the edge of the damaged rail, sending me sprawling onto the track beside Mia. Pain shot through my ankle, but nothing felt broken. Graceful, she said, helping me up. Effective, I countered. We reached the base of the Ferris wheel as the sun began setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and red that matched the fires burning throughout the park. The wheel's control booth stood empty, its door hanging open, blood smeared across the entrance. I need to get to the main controls, Mia said, studying the machinery. But first we should clear the cars. Looking up, I could see several cars contained passengers. Some sat motionless. Whether dead or hiding, I couldn't tell. Others rocked gently as their occupants moved around inside with jerky, repetitive motions. How do we get them down? I asked. Manually cycle each car to the loading platform, but that means bringing down whatever's in them. Mia checked her wrench, testing its weight. Some might be survivors. Some might not be. She nodded grimly and entered the control booth, stepping carefully around the bloodstains. Give me 2 minutes to figure out these controls. Watch for company. I positioned myself at the booth entrance, baseball bat ready. Around us, the park continued its descent into nightmare. Screams still bounced off attraction walls from distant areas, punctuated by occasional gunshots. The main entrance showed orange flames, suggesting vehicles or buildings were burning. Emergency sirens wailed continuously in the distance. The first car descended slowly, its bright yellow paint cheerful against the darkening sky. Inside, a young couple huddled together, alive, terrified, but clearly human. Their eyes showed relief when they saw us. Thank God, the woman gasped as the car reached the platform. We've been up there for hours. When everything started happening, we thought, "Are you hurt?" I asked, helping them out. No, just scared. What's happening down there? We could see people running, fighting. The man's voice shook as he looked back at the park. Disease outbreak, I said simply. Something that makes people violent. You need to get out of the park, head for the main road, flag down any military vehicles you see. They nodded frantically and hurried away into the growing darkness, holding hands as they disappeared between attractions. The next car contained an elderly man who'd apparently had a heart attack during the chaos. Dead, but not infected. Just another casualty of the panic. The third car made my stomach drop. A park employee in a fairy princess costume sat inside, her pink dress torn and bloodied. But it was her face that made me step back. The left side had been partially eaten away, leaving her jawbone exposed. She turned toward us with mechanical precision as the car reached the platform. No recognition in her vacant stare. That's Princess Aurora, Mia said quietly. Real name's Jessica. Sweet kid, studying theater at Penn State. Princess Aurora, Jessica, reached for us with gloved hands, her tiara hanging at an odd angle. The costume's magic was gone, replaced by something obscene. Her mouth opened and closed repeatedly, producing wet clicking sounds as she strained against her seatbelt with mindless determination. I swung my bat, connecting with her skull. The impact sent her tumbling backward into the car, but she immediately began climbing back up with no apparent awareness of the injury, black fluid leaking from the fresh wound. Door! Mia shouted. Close the car door. I slammed the safety door shut just as Jessica reached for me again. Her face pressed against the window, mouth opening and closing silently, leaving bloody smears on the glass. Her movements were purely instinctual. Reach, grasp, bite. We can't let her out, I said, but we can't leave her up there either. There's an emergency release, Mia said, pointing to a lever. It'll drop the car to the ground. Won't be pretty. I pulled the lever. Jessica's car plummeted 30 feet, crashing into the concrete with a sound like breaking china. When the dust settled, nothing moved in the wreckage, just twisted metal and torn fabric. We continued cycling through cars. Most were empty. A few contained bodies, and one held a family of 3. All infected, all trying to claw their way out when the car reached the platform. The father snapped his teeth uselessly at the air, while his wife scratched at the windows with bloody fingernails. Their teenage son simply stared with those horrible milky eyes, mouth hanging open. I lost count of how many times I swung the bat, how many emergency releases we triggered. By the time we finished, full darkness had fallen over Liberty Wheels. Emergency lighting cast everything in harsh white and deep shadow, creating a landscape of sharp contrasts. The infected moved differently in the dark, more cautious but still driven by the same basic impulses, still drawn to any sound or movement. "All right," Mia said, wiping sweat from her forehead. "Now we go up." The Ferris wheel car felt surreal after everything we'd witnessed. As we rose above the park, the full scope of the disaster became clear. Fires burned in at least 6 locations, not coordinated blazes, just random destruction from overturned grills, crashed vehicles, and electrical shorts. The parking lot was a graveyard of abandoned vehicles, many with their doors still open where people had fled. Bodies lay scattered across walkways, some moving with jerky persistence, others completely still. "Look at the main gate," Mia said, pointing. Military vehicles had established a perimeter around the park's entrance, but they weren't letting anyone out. Instead, soldiers in hazmat suits were setting up what looked like a containment barrier. Bright floodlights illuminated a growing crowd of people pressed against the gates, some clearly human, others moving with that telltale infected shuffle. "They're not here to rescue," I realized. "They're here to contain." "Quarantine," Mia agreed. "Can't let whatever this is spread beyond the park." At the wheel's peak, we could see for miles in every direction. The nearby town of Millfield showed normal lights, normal traffic. Whatever had happened at Liberty Wheels was still contained. But for how long? "So what's the plan?" Mia asked. "We can't stay up here forever." "We wait for dawn," I said. "See if the military situation changes. In the meantime, we rest and figure out our next move." She leaned back in the car seat, finally allowing exhaustion to show. "I never thought I'd die at work. Always figured it would be something dramatic. Car accident, skydiving mishap, not eaten alive at a family amusement park. We're not dead yet. Yet being the operative word." She looked at me in the emergency lighting. "You holding up okay? I know this is only your 3rd day. Honestly, I don't think experience would have helped with this." We sat in silence for a while, watching the infected move through the park below like ants in a disturbed colony. Some seemed drawn to the base of the Ferris wheel, gathering in small groups and staring upward with vacant expressions. Others wandered aimlessly between attractions, bumping into barriers and each other, driven by impulses they couldn't understand. "There," Mia said suddenly, pointing toward the far side of the park. "The train." The Liberty Express, a narrow-gauge railroad that circled the park's perimeter, sat idle at its station. The locomotive was an old-fashioned steam engine replica, built to look antique but powered by modern diesel. "Does it still run?" I asked. "Should. I helped with maintenance last month. The track runs right along the back fence. If we could get it moving, we might be able to crash through the perimeter." "And go where?" "They'll have roadblocks on every route out of here. Better than waiting to become zombie food." She studied the train's position. "But getting there's the problem. We'd have to cross half the park." A scream from below made us both look down. Near the funhouse, a group of survivors was making a desperate run for the exit. 5 people. Looked like a family with teenage kids, sprinting between attractions while infected closed in from multiple directions, drawn by the noise and movement. "We have to help them," I said, starting to stand. "How? We're 200 feet up." Mia grabbed my arm. "By the time we get down there..." The family reached the Haunted Mansion attraction and disappeared inside. The infected followed, pouring through the entrance like water through a drain, their basic attraction to sound and movement leading them into the building. For a moment, everything went quiet. Then the haunted house's sound effects activated, probably triggered by motion sensors. Recorded screams. Chainsaws and demonic laughter blared from speakers while strobe lights flashed through windows. The noise drew even more infected from across the park, all shambling toward the mansion with that same mindless determination. "Smart," Mia said. "Use the attraction's noise to confuse them." But the strategy backfired. Too many infected gathered too quickly, all drawn by the same basic impulse toward sound. The family's real screams began mixing with the recorded ones. The strobe lights revealed brief, horrible glimpses of the carnage inside, shapes moving frantically, then more slowly, then not at all. "Jesus," I whispered. "This is what we're dealing with," Mia said quietly. "Pure instinct. No reasoning, no mercy, just hunger." Around midnight, the park had settled into an eerie rhythm. The infected continued their aimless wandering, occasionally bumping into each other or obstacles, but always moving. They never seemed to tire, never paused to rest. Some clustered around areas where survivors might be hiding, drawn by faint sounds or scents. Others simply walked in circles, following whatever stimulus last caught their attention. "You see that?" I asked, watching a group near the carousel. "Yeah, they're drawn to that music box, the one that's still playing." Mia watched as infected stumbled around the broken carousel, following the tinkling melody. Pure stimulus response, like moths to a flame. A new sound reached us. Helicopters approaching from the east, military choppers flying in formation toward the park. But instead of landing, they began circling the perimeter, searchlights sweeping across the chaos below. "Reconnaissance," I said. "They're mapping the situation." One helicopter broke formation and flew directly over the Ferris wheel. A spotlight blazed down, blinding us momentarily. I waved frantically, trying to signal for rescue, shouting even though I knew they couldn't hear me over the rotor noise. The spotlight moved on without acknowledging us, sweeping across other areas of the park. "They saw us," Mia said. "Had to. And decided we weren't worth the risk." The helicopters completed their circuit and flew away, leaving us alone with the infected and the growing realization that no rescue was coming. We were expendable, acceptable losses in whatever containment protocol they were following. "Train it is," I said. "Wait until just before dawn," Mia suggested. "Give us maximum visibility, but still have darkness for cover during the approach." We tried to sleep in shifts, but the infected noises below made rest impossible. Constant groaning, shuffling footsteps, the occasional crash as they knocked over something or bumped into barriers. Around 3 a.m., a fire started in the game booth area, probably an electrical short, casting dancing shadows across everything. "Look at them," Mia said, pointing down. The infected were gathering around the flames, not with any purpose or coordination, but simply drawn by the light and heat. Some walked directly into the fire, their clothing igniting as they stood there, feeling no pain, showing no fear. Others pressed close enough to singe their skin, completely oblivious to the damage. They don't even understand danger, I realized. No self-preservation instinct left. By 5 a.m., the fire had spread to several more locations around the park, not through any infected coordination, but simply because burning zombies had wandered into other flammable areas. Each new blaze drew more infected like a magnet, creating clusters of burning, walking corpses throughout Liberty Wheels. "We need to move now," I said, "before the whole place becomes an inferno." Mia activated the Ferris wheel controls, bringing our car down slowly. The mechanism seemed impossibly loud in the pre-dawn quiet. Several infected turned toward the sound with mechanical precision, but most remained focused on whatever stimulus currently held their attention. Flames, sounds, or simply the last movement they'd detected. We reached the platform and immediately headed for the shadows behind the nearby gift shop. The train station was 800 yards away, a straight shot across relatively open ground. But we'd have to navigate around clusters of infected drawn to various distractions. "Follow the maintenance road," Mia whispered. "Stay low, move fast, stop if anything sees us." We crept through the darkness, using abandoned game booths and food stands for cover. The infected were everywhere, but most seemed focused on specific stimuli. A group clustered around a still-playing arcade game. Others gathered near a broken water fountain that continued to spray. A few stragglers wandered aimlessly, but they moved with that characteristic stumbling gait that made them easy to avoid. Halfway to the train station, we encountered our biggest obstacle. The carousel area was completely blocked by a mass of infected. At least 40 of them stood around the spinning horses, drawn by the mechanical music that still played despite the chaos. They swayed slightly to the rhythm, mouths hanging open, completely mesmerized by the sound. "Go around," Mia breathed. "Through the funhouse." The funhouse entrance gaped like a mouth, its clown facade grinning maniacally despite everything. Inside, emergency lighting cast twisted shadows on the mirrors and painted walls. We moved carefully through the maze, following the path designed to confuse and disorient visitors. In the mirror maze section, our reflections multiplied endlessly. 2 exhausted, blood-stained people carrying improvised weapons. Motion sensors triggered recorded laughter and screams, making us both jump. But the sounds also drew infected footsteps from somewhere deeper in the building. "Trick mirrors activate sounds," Mia said, noticing my confusion. "Motion sensors, we need to move faster." Behind us, something crashed into the mirror maze, an infected maintenance worker still wearing his tool belt. Following the sounds we'd triggered, he moved with that same jerky determination, bumping into mirrors, leaving bloody handprints on the glass as he tried to reach us. We emerged from the fun house near the train station, just as the eastern sky began showing the first hints of dawn. The Liberty Express sat waiting, its engine cold but intact. Mia immediately went to work on the controls while I watched for approaching infected. "Good news and bad news," she said after a few minutes. "Good news, engine starts fine, fuel tank's full. Bad news, the track's blocked." She pointed ahead where several infected had wandered onto the rails, drawn by some long-forgotten stimulus. But worse, a maintenance cart had been overturned across the tracks about 200 yards from the station, probably knocked over during the initial panic. "Can we push through it?" I asked. "Maybe. This thing weighs 8 tons, so we'd probably win, but if we derail, we're dead anyway if we stay here." The infected maintenance worker from the funhouse had followed us outside, along with 2 others drawn by our voices. They approached with that characteristic stumbling gait, arms outstretched, mouths opening and closing soundlessly. Mia nodded and climbed into the engineer's compartment. "All aboard the Escape Express. Next stop, anywhere but here." The engine rumbled to life with a satisfying growl. Several infected immediately turned toward the sound, beginning their shambling approach from various directions around the station. Mia engaged the drive wheels, and we lurched forward. The first infected on the tracks never had a chance. The locomotive's cowcatcher swept them aside like bowling pins. A middle-aged woman in a blood-stained sundress, a teenage boy still clutching a half-eaten hot dog. The second group tried to grab onto the engine as we passed, but their clumsy fingers couldn't maintain any grip. The overturned maintenance cart loomed ahead, a mass of twisted metal blocking our path. Mia pushed the throttle to maximum. "Hold on!" We hit the cart at full speed. The impact threw me against the compartment wall, and for a terrifying moment, I thought we might derail. But the locomotive's weight carried us through, sending pieces of the cart flying in all directions. One infected who'd been wandering nearby was caught in the debris field, crushed instantly, but without any apparent recognition of what had happened. "Woo-hoo," Mia shouted, grinning despite everything. "Always wanted to do that." The track curved around the park's perimeter, following the fence line. Through gaps in the barrier, I could see military vehicles and personnel. Some pointed weapons at us as we passed, but none fired. Apparently, a runaway train wasn't their biggest concern when dealing with a zombie outbreak. We approached the park's rear gate at considerable speed. The fence here was chain-link topped with barbed wire, substantial but not designed to stop an 8-ton locomotive. "Fence coming up," Mia called. "Ram it?" "Ram it." The impact was tremendous. The locomotive punched through the fence like paper, sending a shower of sparks and twisted metal. We emerged onto a rural road, free of Liberty wheels but uncertain about what came next. Behind us, the park burned against the morning sky, The random fires had spread throughout the complex, creating a genuine inferno that would probably consume everything. Maybe that was for the best. Better to burn it all than let whatever this was spread beyond the perimeter. We followed the road for several miles before Mia finally brought the train to a stop near a small farming community. In the distance, sirens wailed as emergency responders rushed toward the park. But it was too late for rescue. Now it was about containment and cleanup. "So what do we do now?" I asked. "We disappear," Mia said simply. "Change our names, move somewhere far away, and try to forget this ever happened." "Think anyone will believe us?" "Do you want them to?" I looked back toward Liberty Wheels. Now a column of smoke on the horizon. Somewhere in that smoke were the remains of Bobo the Clown, Liberty Bear, Princess Aurora, and hundreds of others who'd been reduced to pure predatory instinct. The official story would probably blame gas leaks or terrorist attacks. Anything but the truth about infection and reanimation. "No," I said finally. "I don't want them to believe us." 3 hours later, we abandoned the train in a farm field and walked to the nearest town. I called in sick to a job I'd never returned to, and Mia simply vanished from her old life. We parted ways at a bus station, she heading west, me going south. I never saw her again, but sometimes I wonder if she's out there somewhere, watching the news for reports of unexplained outbreaks or mass disappearances. I know I am. Because what happened at Liberty Wheels wasn't unique. It was too organized, too sudden, too complete to be natural. Someone knew this would happen. Someone was prepared. The military response was too quick, too coordinated. They had protocols in place, equipment ready, containment procedures that suggested this wasn't their first rodeo. And based on what I've been reading in the news lately, strange incidents in Nevada, quarantine zones in Florida, military exercises that look suspiciously like containment operations, I think Liberty Wheels was just the beginning. So if you ever see reports of a gas leak or terrorist attack at a crowded public venue, pay attention to the details. Look for mentions of bite wounds, unexplained aggression, or authorities establishing temporary quarantine zones. And whatever you do, don't go looking for the truth, because sometimes ignorance really is bliss, and some knowledge is too dangerous to possess. The infected at Liberty Wheels weren't intelligent. They weren't coordinated. They were just hungry, mindless predators driven by basic instincts. But that made them even more terrifying, unstoppable, unfeeling, unreasoning. I've told you everything I remember about Liberty Wheels. Now I'm going to delete this account, change my location again, and try to forget I ever worked security at an amusement park. But I know I'll never really forget. Every time I hear carnival music or see a Ferris wheel, I'm back there, watching paradise become hell and humanity become something else entirely. Take care of yourselves out there. And remember, when the screaming starts, it's already too late.